The Tipperary season preview brought to you by orgaretro.com. Go to the website, put in the promo code OurGame, and you'll get 15% off. I actually gave away the Tipperary jersey I had, the Orga one I had, as a Christmas present. So I'm wearing
Hold on a second now. You gave it away
as a
because
present.
you have lost confidence. You have
I,
lost the faith.
that is absolutely not true. What on earth are you even talking about?
Tipperary, our Tipperary on a downward spiral. The questions, we're going to turn this around a bit. You're usually asking the questions more so to me, or we kind of bounce around a bit. I'm going to put the questions to you. Can Tipperary win the All Ireland this year?
Well, look, it's an unfair question. It's a loaded question. Do you know what I want? Tipperary, I don't think so. I don't think so because I just think Limerick are unstoppable this year. I think Tipperary can beat any other team, but I just don't know this year if Tipperary can beat Limerick. That's fair enough answer. Like I'm putting it all out there. But
I'm amazed you actually put it out there. I'm actually amazed. You'll be lynched.
I think an awful lot of Tipperary fans kind of feel the same way that
they're your kryptonite, aren't they? They are your kryptonite.
They're everybody's kryptonite. But it's just that pace, power. Tactically, they're so good. You know, I mean, John Kiley's teaching behind enemy lines there in the Abbey in Tipperary town. He's obviously been studying us at close quarters and all that. And what I want to see from Tipperary this year is trying some of the younger lads, because you're talking about the 2020 and 2019 under 21, under 21, under 20, under 21 All-Ireland champions. So there's obviously as good a hurlers coming through Tipperary as there is anywhere in the country. So I think that's fair to say. Now, I'm interested to see if, like, Ger Brown apparently isn't part of the panel at the moment. I'm not sure exactly why he's not on it, but he's one of these players that I would hope would come through and kick on and be a really brilliant player in blue and gold. But I always had that concern based on the type of player he is. I'm not sure which way it would have went. But anyway, we'll monitor that. But this year, I just want to see Tipperary the way I like me steak. I want it raw. Knock off the antlers, wipe its ass, and serve it on up to me. I want to see Tipperary be raw this year. And I want those young lads out there, and I want to put the scent of blood in their nostrils, send them out there and start going around like dodgem cars and impose Tipperary physically on games. Is that what you think Tipperary need, or what do you think Tip need?
No, I tell you what, right? It's a fine balance putting these young lads in. Like, who of the older breed are going to lose out, do you think, this year potentially? If you're saying that a lot of new guys are going to come in, and they probably should. It's gonna be a fine balance though. But of the older guys, Pádraig Maher, Brendan Maher, Shamie Canlan, Bonner Maher, like Bubbles, these guys, the older guys, who do you think is going to who are the likeliest? Who's going to hold on to them? Are all these guys still mainstays of this team, or are their positions up for grabs this year? Probably for the first time, I would say nearly, over the last decade, they haven't been up for grabs. Are they up for grabs? Are those big positions up for grabs this year?
I think they are, and we talked about this at the end of last season, how maybe Liam Sheedy was a little bit too loyal to some players. I mean, well, maybe we were wrong. These guys could have been shooting the lights out in training, and you have to go with them if that's the case. But there's a few players that have been there for a long time, have a lot of miles in the legs. But like Seamus Callan has more miles in the legs than anyone, but he's still a guaranteed starter, and rightly so. I don't think that's up for debate. So it isn't always about that age thing. It's about how did the lads perform? Did they look like they were struggling in the pace against maybe the likes of Limerick and some of these other teams? Like, if I go through the team, Brian Hogan, he'll start again. I've no doubt about that. Cathal Barrett. You thinking Barry Hogan might get the start?
I think potentially, yeah.
I think Brian Hogan has enough credit in the bank. I think he's going to keep it. I'm not saying he shouldn't improve, because there's a couple of goals that I feel he'll be disappointed about himself, but I think he will stay in there.
I think it's an area that will have been looked at closely. Particularly with regards to how versatile the puckouts could be potentially from Barry Hogan, who has an absolute boomer of a puckout, same as Brian Hogan has. He might be a bit more versatile with shorter kind of mid-range kind of puckouts. I think that's an interest. I think there'll be a decent bit of focus on that.
Now, Jake Malone, who obviously I heard with in Coola and has played with Brian Hogan at UCD, I remember asking him before, can Brian Hogan do those short ones? Because Tipperary were doing an awful lot of boomers there in the last couple of years, and I remember asking Jake about a year or two ago, is Brian Hogan able to mix it up and do those short ones? And he said he is. So I feel like maybe that's something they they can work on a little bit more. But I think Cathal Barrett, who was wrongly sent off against Galway, I think we can agree on that one last year. Yeah, can I get the nod of the head?
I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that all day, every day.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so I think he'll start. Ronan Maher will start and was one of Tip's most impressive players. I think Brendan Maher will start. Barry Heffernan, I think it's very important that Barry Hennessy is fit. Like, he was brilliant against Galway last year and generally has been really good for Tip last year.
Barry Heffernan, Barry Heffernan.
So if Barry Heffernan and Seamus Kennedy, who are both over 6 foot, who are both greyhounds, who both can hurl, but can also stop their men. I mean, I think that you've got the makings of a decent backline through a lot of those players I've said there. Paddy Cadell, maybe he could be in the mix-up somewhere as well.
Alan Flynn,
I thought was one of the star turns last year, but maybe they'll decide, maybe we'll put him midfield, maybe not. I would have thought madness putting him midfield last year, but then he actually goes and plays really well there. So sometimes you have to hold your hands up and say, you got that wrong. This lad has shown something.
Tell you one thing though, Shane, just in those players you named, there is quite a bit of mobility there.
Well, you see, this is the problem. Last year, Tipperary had some injury worries, and you didn't always have Seamus Kennedy, and you didn't always have Barry Heffernan, and Paddy Maher wasn't fully right going into that Limerick game. And I think, like, we've named all those names, and if mobility is going to be the main concern this year, if power and physique and, like, you know, a very good hurler was what you were looking for, Paddy Maher is what you'd be going for here. But it might be a tough ask for him to go out in those games, and we talked about in some of the other videos where the position of wing back is no longer what it used to be. Now it's be all around the field, cover behind you plus cover in front of you and everything. It might be a tough one for Paddy to get into the team this year, but maybe if he's had a good run of it, maybe he will still be in the team, and that's a tough one to know. But I think maybe the likes of Jason Ford up in the full forward line, he might be under pressure for his spot this year, because some days he'll shoot the lights out and do something unbelievable, but you know, a bit like Conor Lahan with Cork, you need to see it more games. Is that a fair point to make? Noel McGrath and John McGrath, they're not going to have played 13 weeks in a row for their club going into this season, obviously, as we know, because club won't be played. So there's a lot of factors that led to Tipperary going from the best team in the country in 2019 to 2020 looking like they were on their heels a lot.
It's like that episode of Father Ted. In 2019, they were the second best team, in my opinion. But sure, listen, that's another story. It'll be interesting to see how particularly we say Noel and John McGrath come back, and probably Paddy Maher as well. I'd imagine there would have been a massive focus on, like, not saying that there wouldn't be a massive focus on mobility the whole time anyway, but I'd say massive focus on getting these guys as agile and as nimble and kind of as supple as possible, trying to, particularly with someone like Paddy, not saying he's trying to defy Father Time, but he probably needs to alter his body a small bit just to how the game has changed even in the last couple of years. I'd be surprised, but given how defiant he is as a player, I still think he'd start, and I still think he could be very influential. And I think the fact that he knows there's a bit of pressure on, I think that would potentially drive him on a bit more. The two McGraths are an interesting one as well. Lots of potential there as well. Maybe not without any disrespect, maybe not the most mobile players, particularly in the way the modern game is now. Jason Ford is probably similar as well. Doesn't probably cover the ground. Like, if he's playing half forward, like, he's not going to cover the ground that a Gerard Hegarty or a Tom Morrissey is. That's probably not his game. So I think a lot of it is probably a bit further up. I think a good bit of it is probably from midfield up, of what type of players that they're putting in there. And there's plenty of options, as you say. When you go down through those under 20 and under 21 All-Ireland wins, there's a lot of those guys have gotten a good bit of time now. They've been in around Pals now. They've got through the S&C for a couple of years. They know what it's all about, and it's now is probably the time to push on. You know, it's probably the last dance, you'd say, realistically, for some of those older guys as well. Callan is obviously carrying a knock into the league, which is a worry, because in years where he's had a clean bill of health, i.e. 2019, he's been absolutely outstanding. Last year there were niggles on and off, and I thought he performed really well. He didn't shoot it out on the scoreboard, but he performed really well. In 18 as well, he had back injuries. This back injury is kind of gathering a bit more pace the older he gets. But I'd say it's probably the last dance for him, maybe Paddy. Not saying it's the last time to play for Tip, but might be their last realistic chance of maybe being a starter on a team that could potentially win All-Ireland.
Can I throw out a backline? I mean, last year people did talk about pace at Tipperary. In fact, it was talked about in 2018 as well. Remember Gerald Nan doing a very strong column about it. But let's say you had a backline that was Cathal Barrett, Ronan Maher, Brendan Maher, Barry Heffernan, Seamus Kennedy, and Michael Breen. You're talking about serious pace and power in a back six there, not to mention a lot of hurling. Am I right? Am I right?
Michael Breen.
In the back line, throw him into the backs where he should be. Like, he's a brilliant back.
He's going huh? He's going to... You will flog this until the day he is not playing inter-county anymore. I don't necessarily disagree with you, but there's no... Like, where does Niall O'Mara come into Tipperary this year, actually?
Well, I'd say if everyone's fit, he goes back into the half-forward line. And maybe even midfield, but I would say most likely wing forward. Because if everyone is fit... if you have Seamus Kennedy and Barry Heffernan fit, that's the wing back spots, or else two of the back six spots gone. So I'd say it's more likely half forward. Then of course you have Dan McCormack, who was dropped for the first game against Limerick, and obviously because of the way, we were horrified by it at the time, and obviously the way he performed, he came back into the team from then on. Alan Flynn is in there as well, and obviously you didn't even name him in that back six, because maybe more thinking midfield. So all of a sudden, Paddy Cadell as well, you're starting to think maybe there's options here. But it is about juggling them and getting them just right and having the right blend of pace and power in the inside forward line. Am I talking Tip back into contention here?
I tell you what, do you know what? Listen to you, I'm kind of thinking, Jesus,
Tipper back.
There's more options here. Tipper back is right. There's more options here than maybe I had realised. Like, it's not like with some other counties. Sheedy does have the raw materials to work with here. It's just a matter of meshing the youth and the experience. But at least he has it to mesh. Yeah. He's got a lot more to work with than a lot of other county managers have. So, like, if they avoid Limerick, they have a great chance of winning All Ireland. It'd be interesting to see how they set up if they play Limerick this year. It's Limerick Cork obviously in the semi-final. Tipper awaiting the winners of Clare and Waterford in the semi-final. So there's a high possibility that it could be Tip and Limerick in a Munster final. It'd be so intriguing to see how they would, Dan McCormack would be a 100% starter, like a guaranteed starter. They would surely pick their team a lot different if they met this time around. Didn't even mention Jake Morris, who I thought had a decent year at times last year. Signs that he's ready to be a permanent starter. So, there's plenty, you started...
Willie Connors, Mark Keogh, I don't want to start building this up too much, but maybe...
You started by saying they couldn't win All Ireland, and now we're saying, they have a great chance to win All Ireland.
They can't be stopped. Look, let us know out there with the comments in the comment section there what you think we'll get from Tipperary this year. If you want to get the Tipperary Orga Retro jersey, it is lovely. I'll throw it up on screen there. Go to orgaretro.com and put in the promo code OurGame. Also, if you're putting up a fantasy team, you might have to rejig with the whole Seamus Callanan there, get him in after a week or two. Maybe you wouldn't even start him because he may not be taking the frees. But even so, go to fantasyhurling.ie. There's up to €2,300 worth of prizes to be won. And then finally, a little mention for the club online fundraisers that we're doing with Our Game. If your club needs to raise funds later this year, email events@ourgame.ie and we'll explain how. We'll do a live show for you, virtually hosted on Zoom. We'll provide the ticketing platform. And if you want to sell raffle tickets as well and put local businesses up on screen, we can do that too. So that's events@ourgame.ie and we can email out an info pack to you.